Welcome to the Chris Rod Max Show, where every week we speak to founders and startups in the AI space. Our aim is to shed light onto the rapidly evolving AI landscape, talk to the AI founders about their ambitions, and discuss the implications of their space for all of us. This season, we focus on automation and workflow optimization, and I'm thrilled to welcome Patrick from Automaited to the show. Hello.
Hi, thanks for the invite.
Great to have you here, and we're really excited to learn more about you and Automaited. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Cool. Yeah, I'm Patrick. I'm the CEO of Automaited. We are about to democratize process automation, and I'm based in Berlin. Moved there a couple of years ago. Before that, worked for Get Your Guide, a digital company that many know. Hands-on into operations and AI now, and curious to see what we're discussing today.
Sure. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about Automaited? What exactly do you do on the workflow optimization front?
So our goal as a company is, as mentioned, to democratize process automation, meaning that we want to make it accessible for basically average knowledge worker in the world, because there's a lot of tedious, repetitive tasks out there. And initially, in the US, we worked for VCG a lot with many operational teams around the globe, and all of them actually are very inefficient, right? Labor in large corporations and smaller companies, and also then in digital companies like Get Your Guide, manual tasks happening everywhere, right? And I remember in VCG, but also Get Your Guide, all the discussions that we had, like how can we make the teams more efficient? This is crazy just how many manual things people do nowadays. If you put this on a global scale, it's massive, right? So many knowledge workers, I think 1 billion knowledge worker, and the efficiency that we lose is crazy, right? And we basically build technology that allows everybody to automate their processes without any work.
And Patrick, does that mean that we will not have to do any slides anymore in the future?
Well, I wouldn't make slides is, yes, a repetitive task, but it's also a creative task, right? So there's probably creation. So there's, I think, those agents or AI applications that have a very niche focusing one particular. I think there's a new one that's called Artisan, for example. They do sales. Deep Opinion is doing document processing, which is, let's say, solving a big problem in a niche, right? So for salespeople or for slide designers, right? And they probably will get even better over time. The thing that we are looking at is the repetitive tasks that knowledge workers do every day. So this could be, for example, in an insurance company, there's people getting spreadsheets that need to enter into an ERP system. There's service tickets that you need to handle and, set up meetings, update some base data, put invoices into them, right? So all those things that are very unique to companies. People always think that processes are very standard, but like every company thinks very differently, right? You might, maybe of the listeners, have tried automation tools like UiPath and Zapier. They're super powerful, but in the end, they're very technical, right? So you drag and drop boxes and you have like all this technical language in there, which is super painful. And that's why many of all non-technical knowledge worker actually don't know how to do this. And we build an AI actually does all the work and all the automation background, meaning that it's user identifying repetitive patterns, and then it's directly building an automation for the user and plays out a smart button directly into the user's workflow, which then means you don't really have to think about, you just do your daily work and suddenly this button pops up and you click on it and then the system runs your process, right? And with this, we can make sure that it's basically enabling every person out there without any technical knowledge to get rid of those tedious tasks. So yes, you will need to create slides if you use Automaited, but maybe there might be Gamma in future or so that helps you to solve that.
That's super interesting. Can I just jump in with a quick question here? So, Patrick, you mentioned about how UiPath is powerful, but they're not very accessible and to average players. And I like the fact that when you talk about process automation, you basically allow me to just go on with my day, and eventually you allow me to click and automate it. So let's say, for example, if someone wants to start changing their processes, we'd love to hear about how is the AI enabling some of that as well? Because as a knowledge worker, as you probably know, you might be able to collect information here today, but the different data sources might come in differently, and someone wants it differently from an output perspective. So I'd love to hear that those weird cases. I'm pretty sure It'd be pretty cool.
That's actually also one of the key points, right? So maybe just take us and all, there's many automations company out there, right? And they have super powerful and great tools. And those tools, I would say, are great for those corporate processes that are very standard, that companies do for ages, and that you just run. Well, they're great for those. The point that they have not covered so far is this AI first thinking, right? Because they always integrate AI as an art in a way that, yes, I can now use AI in my process flow to extract data from somewhere in an unstructured. But this is like not solving the big problem that you somehow have to realize this automation, right? Or maintain it even, right? As you said, like things are changing. And those tools, they, as a little bit of background context, they live on separate servers, right? So they don't live on your device. They are a separate server in a studio somewhere, and they run there. And that's why they have a very, like, sort of a lab environment, right? And in order to do or to solve what you were just mentioning, that you have changing processes, requirements, you need to be actually present where the work is happening. And the work is happening on every user's device. And that's why our application is not running on a server, but it's running on a device. And it's constantly monitoring basically the behavior. And as soon as there's a change, right? So it also knows, okay, I have this automation that's running. And if you say the input form or the input table is changing, suddenly the system sees, okay, I'm running this process, but there's always this manual step that the user is doing, or there's a change, right? And you can either proactively adapt those workflows by just talking to our AI or typing, or at some point in time, the system would also pick it up and realize something different now. And actually something that also happens in the process, which is very important when you also think about process automation in our case, is that details, right? So like system data is one thing that we use, but there's so much context also in the head. So our system is also proactively asking the user, for example, is the date format always the same? Is there a save button? Is there anything I need to consider? Because you need to make sure that you're really 100% compliant with what the user wants to have. Otherwise, they're not going to use. Yeah, it's basically shit in, shit out, and that doesn't really solve anything in the end. So this will also solve that problem. In the end, it's the same approach. Being where they're working, let's say we call it hybrid intelligence. So it's not only purely AI and doing its magic without the user knowing what is happening, but it's basically the synergy of the knowledge and intelligence of the knowledge worker, where all the information is and lives, with technology that enables them to do what they're doing, but just more efficiently.
I was very interested and curious to learn more about how you integrate with a company's IT landscape. And I suppose also, what are some of the safety considerations, compliance? What's your experience on that?
To start with also the previous comment that you had, right? So there's like automating a process, there's always this phase of I need to understand the requirements, which can happen in those different ways. Either you observe the system and ask them questions, you proactively talk to the system, you maybe like even proactively record the process, right? So that's gathering those requirements, and then you build it. And the building also just happens in the background. So the integration with our solution is that in most cases, we don't need API. So we basically interact with your device as a user would do it in the background, right? So if you, for example, have access to SAP or a reporting tool or whatsoever, our system, if wanted, can also do the same as you. But it's not that we basically in the background somewhere need other, let's say, access data, for example, to just do stuff in the background and nobody can see it. So I would say in an easy way, we mimic the user from a behavior. There's some applications that you need to integrate with because they're purely getting difficult. Google Suite, for example, but it's in the end, no API integration, what also makes it so scalable for us, because we are building a system that actually starts to learn UI interfaces. Because and that's one key challenge in the automation space. And a simple example would be a drop-down field. You have like a drop-down field for a human is very simple, right? But if you like go into the depth, you really realize, okay, there's drop-down fields where you just can select. There's drop-down fields where you can write something. There's drop-down fields you only see something to select if you start to write something. There's drop-down field you can select multiple things, right? So you need to in other tools, you need to know what kind of drop-down field do I have here and how do I interact with it. And we need to make this tool simple in a way that understands that. And coming to your maybe compliance point here as well, is there's the phase now where people are right, and that's why for many customers we basically build automations based on recordings, so we don't do the pattern recognition. Many companies also as a starter, they know where they have inefficiencies, where they have repetitive processes, right? So it's good enough to start with, okay, let's look at this process, let's record it, let it build, and then it runs. And if it runs, in most cases, it also runs only on the user's device. Only if you basically use this AI power for unstructured data, for example, you need to send data to somewhere else. But in most cases, it can run on the local device purely. So in this regard, there's little concern in terms of data. We also keep all our data in Europe, right? Servers in Frankfurt. Or if we need to use AI, it's also going into the UK, not into the US. And it's a key factor, right? It's a lot of corporates also look at that. Where is the data going? It's tricky. UK in many cases is okay. And then looking into the future, I think there will be a lot of things changing directions. So if you look at the governmental space, there will be regulations, there will be rules and guidance and laws, how to do that. But also, such as a GPT or so, this will be, let's say, a commodity, right? There's Cloud, there's so many of those companies. So they need to develop in a way that they're accessible for all those costs. So there will be where the data is safe, where they're secure, they're stored on different data. There's Chinese walls between different data sources, which then also will also make this discussion much easier in future.
I guess my next question is also relevant to enterprise, is around business process mapping. So from my personal experience, we realized that, business process mapping sometimes could be quite complicated, especially if you're larger corporate with zero documentation. So I would love to understand, like from your perspective, how are you solving that? Because it sounds like you're following the user. And I would say sometimes users are sending things out for certain processing, but they don't really know where they're sending it to, why they're sending it to. So let's understand as well, from your business process automation tool, from all the corporates or companies that you've been working with, do you help with the business process mapping? I find that very, very fascinating. And also, how do you, I guess, improve it? Because traditionally we have BPO, and now we have BPA, right? You have outsourcing, you get automation.
So that's one concept that you can make use of in order to automate chunks, which we can also do, right? You do always like smaller steps, and then you add all the edge cases, complexity over time, because that's also one thing that companies always say, yeah, this process is like this, right? And then you're like 2 or 1 week down into using the automation, and then you're like, wait, actually, if this, then right, that doesn't really work. So you come across all those things, and that's why it's important that you grow with the users as well, that you don't do this like upfront work of everything high detail, because nobody knows, right? And this is also what's costing time and money. So we think about it in a way, let's start, get on the road, and then you find out all the, let's say, detailed way as well, and you can adapt along the way. But in terms of process mapping, our system is also, that's what you need in the end, right? You need to understand what is happening, and the process flow would be the easiest. So our tool also provides a, let's say, process recap on a higher level to the user, which in technical details is much higher, but just to explain, okay, I do this, then I do this, then I do this, if this and this happens, a very simplified process mapping. And this is something that our system does by the system data, right? So that's one information, but also asking the right questions. So it's built in a way, I sometimes call it the process consultant. It's asking you all the questions that if you would now explain the process to me, you probably would leave out, 20, 30, 40% of information. And I only come to you like afterwards and say, okay, how actually do I solve this, right? And that is what the system is proactively collecting to say, okay, I need to understand this. And what is this edge case here? And what happens if this, right? So with this, you build a full virtual process map. And this then is translated
in any way.
So something that we do with customers now is, in the end, you can very simple ROI calculation, because our pricing works in a way that we value add, I always say. So in the end, if a user clicks the button and we add value, there's a credit counter running, and basically what a credit is costing you. Very simple to calculate ROI there, which helps a lot, but also helps with the fact that it is not like many other tools. The key point, like, how many devices do I install? For 2 users, you pay 2 licenses. If you want to have 2 automations, you pay for 2 automation licenses. And we basically move away from this, because our future is also that we are your assistant along the way for every process, and we only basically charge credits or money then if we add value, right? And this is something that is crucial to basically working with corporates. And time savings, that's often like an interesting fact, right? If you think about the sub steps that we automate, we're actually as fast as any other automation tool. It's a click and then woof, it's running. So it's super fast. So in a sub step, it's probably, 95% time saving, 90% time saving. If you now take the overall process, and that's going back to like, how do you separate out different sub process parts? It varies, right? So a cyclical example that I always bring, you have a process and it's there's still a person required because they need to upload a document. And there's no standard to it because there's no standard naming, there's no standard saving or allocation for this document. So there's still some human step required in that. Depending on how long this takes, the overall process might be then, a 20, 30, 40, 50% saving. But everything that the AI is taking over it's probably like 90, 95% of time saving.
I actually asked, I think it was Copilot, one of those, to summarize Automated. And you know what I got back? I got back like, okay, value propositions about process automation software, data transfer, extraction, and so forth. And then they actually had a listing of how much hours you actually save per week. I actually thought it was on your website, but for example, it says like customer support manager saves 2 hours per week by automating customer data. HR manager gets reduced work 8 hours per week. So I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I haven't tried that, but it's somehow you need to make this tangible, right? And the cool thing actually with our solution is that if you think about the integration of our smart button, right? So you do your workflow, and whenever the automate, this button pops up, right? And that's why with our solution, if we automate a process, we maximize the time savings by just being like this natural,
Do you have any recommendations for, the listeners, prizes that would love to automation? Like how to actually come up with a use case that could be fitting?
So what customers in discussions is that the way to start if as a corporation as a whole is to start probably with the management level, because they know where there's a lot of people, what kind of processes overall they're happening, the details, right? Which is totally fine. Like no manager probably should know all the details, but they know where there's a lot of stuff happening that maybe a lot of different people do, or that a few people do very, very often. And that's the things that you start to look into.
That's lovely. I think I have a question, I guess, based on some of the things that you talk about. So number one is based on the pricing model that you have talked about, which I find it super interesting because normally, business process automation, they like to charge per seat, exactly like you said. They're not entirely tied to somehow the value added. So I'd love to understand how that works from your perspective.
So like the big question was like, is the advantage of our price model higher than basically the disadvantage that we always need to explain it a little bit because it's not so intuitive? But the root cause for us for going down this path was that we said we want to democratize process automation, meaning we make this accessible to everybody and we have to be installed on another user's computer. Let's say, automation, the time I save and the money I save worth the money I spend for an extra automation, right? If you always have those thoughts in mind, then you you're constrained again, right? Then you're basically back to this question, okay, where do I start? What do I take? Where's the process that is really worth to do? And we charge complexity of a process a few credits, right? So if the process 4 credits, if it's super short, it's a few credits. It's a win-win situation, right? Because in the end, the prices are so low that it's basically always worth seconds do I save and how much I spend, and then you spend half a cent for automating this process. Fine, why not, right?
I love that. Just a quick one on that as well. I see this as a very scalable way of doing it. Simply because you start up with something. So if you go in and say that you want to sell per automation per seat, you're almost capped by the amount of automation that you can think of. Whereas when you do democratization of processes, you never really know where are the automation processes. You just scale as it goes. And I like the idea of instead of pay per use, you kind of just pay per value. And I think we all should move that more. Just saying, this is cool.
Shifting gears here, we've spoke a lot about your software, the use cases you address. Tell us a little bit more about the business side, perhaps? Who's the team? What's sort of like on your roadmap? Where do you stand in terms of the company maturity, etc.?
The cool thing is that this is one point of Automated was a very natural situation where Alex, Dennis, and Eric, the technical co-founders of Automated, they know each other from university, RWTH Aachen, so one of the most prestigious tech universities in Germany, and had their great jobs after university. Like the Dennis, for example, that's also giving a little bit of a flavor what kind of people we need for our companies. Was working for the German Federal Office of IT Security. Right, so like the IT department protecting the most secure German data, where they have those guys standing in front of the doors and waiting there with guns. And this is also how, I mean, when they met, to come back to the beers, they met at a reunion, like, I don't know, discussing life, but also discussing technology. Dennis also published a paper back then as lead author around AI early. And like all this influences from their jobs came together and it was, okay, we need to build this, magically builds automations, and they quit their jobs. Right. And of just doing it and getting stuff done, something that's deep and rooted company, but also the people that we hire. We're now a team of 18 people. Right. And many other companies probably would have been much larger because they hire a lot of code automations. But linking that to our development, in the end, we not only need to build an automation form, for example, like you, I always take UiPath because that's the one that most people know, but it can be automation anywhere, Blue Prism, whatsoever, right? You need to have this platform, but then you need to have a team that is not only capable of using that platform to build automations manually, right? So all these around the world that you then hire and serve the customers, but you need to have the smart people that push the tech boundaries. And linking that to our product, there's also different stages that you can. The first stage that we also commercialized was once we had a platform, you have something to automate with, right? So we had a place where the automations to play them out, to manage them, and so on and so forth. So that's the basic thing that everybody needs, and that's where most automation companies stop, right? So that's the first product that we had that we also started to commercialize with, like every other classical tool. We then talk to customers to build their automations, which helps a lot to understand what's happening around the world. This is maybe also one key thing about AI. Don't only build stuff in the lab. You need to build it with customers, because in the lab, it always works at some point in time. But then if you bring it out into real work, it just falls apart, right? And then, so this is like the first step that we had to achieve. And now we've, I would say, like crossed the line of the second achievement, is that we have a solid two UI elements. One is basically this process consultant that understands and helps you with the building an automation without any human in the loop is very difficult. Try to ask Gemini whatsoever, get out there, like it won't work, right? So you need to build a system that uses those AI as fuel, but the car and the engine you need to build yourself, right? And that's the second thing that we have done, and something that we're now live testing with customers, and you fine-tune this more towards market ready. Then the last step will be more a feature update of integrating this predictive pattern, because we have done this in the past. And let's say from the problems to solve, that's probably the smaller one for us now. What we serve customers currently is that if they have the right tech stack, they can self-create their automations. But for other users, we basically use our technology right for every thing with our product.
And in terms of processes as well, based on what you about, it feels, every time you do a process, it becomes a lot more like a code. And if you can code it, you somehow can automate it, right? So I always think of it as like, process is just a code for a giant organization to work. It's a giant organization is a giant program of different people writing those little different codes. And I find it super interesting from your perspective, which is, what is the inflection point and where will we get to? You talk about all the different roadmaps that you're getting on, and what inflection point are we going on now? And is it, some feel by the Gen AI revolution? But I would also love to hear your thoughts as well. How are we thinking about the zeitgeist around treating automation? Because there's some pushback. There are also that will just embrace, then you have people like Sam Altman that talks about a $1 billion company with one person. So love to hear your thoughts about all this, right? Because it feels like there are multiple things that are coming together. to make this possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see this one person, $1 billion. It would be mind blowing. But the first inflection point really was like end of, what was it, 2022 or so, when GPT-3 was released, right? And like this was just technically an inflection point, also from a mindset perspective, right? Right. And coming back to the point that you mentioned, in the end, those systems, they wouldn't know how to build an automation on their own, right? So there needs to be this application layer. And again, like Google, for example, in the past, right? Google was this massive search engine, and over time, there were a lot of, let's say, applications that were built on top that were very differentiated and used technology to build something powerful, right? And that's something that we now see the companies that add value and will add value for a long time. They use the AI technology as fuel, but not basically as their key component. It's one thing to like make this technology to move faster. And the next inflection point for, I'd probably say, any kind of technology will be a step where you have the applications layer so far that, let's say, self and develop over time. For us, this, for example, means a practical example that I always bring is, in the past or still now with many tools, you have to, like, I don't know, let's say you have an input date and you have an output form, right? And you need to then map, okay, name goes here, address goes here, right? Like one by one, you need to map this. Now, our tool now is already built in a way to say, okay, here's the input data, this is the destination of the data, go, figure it out, right? And then like you don't need to do this work. And the inflection point for us now for automation perspective comes to drive the system to a dimension where it can learn all the different behaviors of interfaces, right? So you need to understand all those drop downs. You need to understand the world that you can sit in, like reducing the amount of information that is required to the minimal and let the system figure out the rest, right? So saying, okay, this is the source of the data, this website, complete this process on this, I don't know, tool, right? And then you're at a level where where it's really powerful and you can scale into any kind of process, because the system is so far that it can auto-complete, in brackets, all the things that you normally would need to explain, right? And for us, this is a technical inflection point that's on the horizon, like building this tool in a way that it self-learns every interface out there, so you don't need to teach it.
Patrick, I would love to test and see what you think about them. The first one, which is 61% of ML applications are in the automation market. Now, as someone who is in the market, can you help structure the market for us?
I would say so far, probably yes. So there's a machine learning something, finding a pattern, understanding like what's happening there, which really is direct bound to automation to some sort, right? And that's why naturally this might make. I would be surprised. In the end, it's how you define it, right? Because like automation can be anything, right? And automation can also be if you use machine learning to understand a large chunk of data, for example, in insurance business. In the end, you automate the process of somebody thinking about it. So actually, now taking a second to think about it, maybe it's even more, right? Because it's how you define it, right? And if you define as automation where human work is replaced by study or data, is that maybe it's biased towards process automation at the moment. But I think the application of machine learning technologies as such is much wider in future, right? It's just a matter of time when people know how to use machine learning, use that technology to include it into other form of application or use cases. And that's the same path as with LLMs that we have now. People haven't been really sure like how to use those, where to use those. And that's why like the most natural thing at the beginning was content creation, because it's text in, text out, and use it for content creation. But there's now so many different applications that you can use that technology in the background to serve something, that this will change over time. Same will be with machine learning.
What about this statement, which is 12 jobs will be automated by late 2020s, by mid 2030s?
This 2030 number can be very different, right? So it can be like everything where we like over promise and delivered, and it's only 10%, but it can also, right? And people are always really scared about this for natural in the end, right? So those jobs maybe will be automated or replaced by technology, but there's new jobs coming up, right? So it's like always things are changing. In the past, we just had a lot more people working on the fields, and now we have to see, but like people move to other jobs, right? And how you process the corpse, for example. And this will be the same natural development that you will have with AI. AI will just take, or technology will take over and replace maybe jobs, but there will be new jobs that are coming up, right? So somehow, coming back to this example, the AI, I need to build it, train it, learn it, whatever, new jobs coming up.
How would you build an AI first organization, knowing what you know about building a startup right now and also in the automation space? How would you think about that question?
Yeah, that's a very good one. That's a very crucial one that we had to learn ourselves as well. Is my key learning for AI first organization or product is you need to make sure that vision and not due to current structures and technology, right? So building something with AI is in many cases completely new. So you have to build a very new product. And this goes for all corporations. If you think about building an AI first company, where many companies struggle is that they think about, okay, how can I use now LLMs? Because that's currently the one thing where people think about, okay, this is AI. How do you use LLMs in my daily work? Which is, I think that's like not only 1, 2, 3, 4 steps too short, right? You need to think about, okay, what is actually my goal of the business? And how do I build not only a structure in my company, but also a tech setup in my system that allows AI in the places where we can, right? So in our case, for example, this was the realization that, yes, we can use all this great market technology from the iPaaS and automation anywhere and all those frameworks, but that doesn't work if you need to live on the user's computer, right? And if you want to be pure and synergy with the user, you need to build new technology, right? And this is a tough pill to swallow. So being AI first means probably a big change, right? And that's why my thinking is you want to move AI first. It's like always, so you somehow need to probably separate this out from your core business, right? And have something, either a product or a system set up, a service that you really build around AI first thinking, and then let it grow, right? And then you see how this maybe then coexists or replaces your core business at some point in time. But trying to weave AI into a even larger organization is tricky, right? And then, yes, it will bring some benefits, but it won't be truly AI first.
That people compare AI to like a junior associate or intern or something, whereby, you don't have to hire the juniors anymore and you just hire the senior straight away. Yeah. But that actually comes, somehow juniors will become seniors and seniors will at one point, or had been at one point, they were also interns and juniors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't see it like this, right? And that's again about AI, I don't know, rephrasing of sentences, creating content, whatsoever. There's like so many more things that you can do with it if you really think about it. And the question is like going back to, okay, what's the purpose of our company? What are the products that we sell? And how can we maybe now, but also not only thinking about now, but with like future technology advancements, think about rebuilding our organization and maybe our products.
Cool. And maybe one last question from my side, which is, so see Automated maybe like 1 year, 2 years down the road. What are some of the industries you may tap into right now and in the future?
Mm-hmm. I have a very clear picture system to be market ready with the self-service functionality, meaning that I can just ship you our application and you just get away from your Uber invoice downloading and uploading and filling in, because you just expand, you have your smart button. There's still some technical challenges to solve until then, but that's the goal, right? For us to have reached this inflection point where we can, without any manual work, enable people to just run our tool and automate their workflows.
Democratizing processes.
Yeah, how nice is it if you run your process, you explain it, you click a few buttons, they have the system asking you a couple of questions, and there's this beautiful purple smart button popping up and saying, hey, click here, we do that for you.
I love that. I love that, because I can imagine waking up one day, if you can do it for physical stuff, it'll be pretty good as well. Waking up, opening my door, opening up all my stuff. I'll be pretty happy with that.
Well, there's
and I guess
work on a robot, right? So let's see.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure your solution will be down there. I guess one quick question: where can people find out more about Automated and about yourself? what if our listeners and audiences who want to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you?
So 2 easy ways. Either go to automated.com and there's this lovely red button to book a demo. This in most cases lands with me. Happy to talk about Automated, but also processes in general, or just go on LinkedIn and look for Patrick Mueller and probably with Automated as rather common. And then you'll find me there. Perfect.
And I guess you hear it here. I think democratize, automated. I think I like to call it AUTOMAITED. Lovely name as well. So guys, you know where to find Patrick.
Cool. Guys, thank you so much. This was really, really interesting. Thank you, Patrick, for all the insights, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day as well.